Hana sat in the back row of the Galactic Council chambers and watched the same thing happen again. The tall blue alien from Velthar stood at the center podium and spoke in his clicking language about why humans could not expand their trade routes. His translator made his words sound calm, but Hana knew he was angry. He was always angry when humans asked for anything. "The proposal from Earth Sector is denied," the council speaker announced. Her voice echoed through the massive chamber. Around Hana, the other human diplomats stayed quiet. They had learned that speaking up only made things worse. The Xerillian delegate leaned forward in his floating chair. His four arms moved as he spoke. "Humans are useful workers, but they think too small. These trade routes would interfere with established commerce patterns." Hana touched her communication device. A message waited from Jinsu back on Earth. She read it quickly and felt her heart beat faster. "Operation Silent Winter is approved. Begin Phase 1 immediately." She looked around the chamber at all the alien species. The Zephyrians with their gray skin and large eyes. The Krathari with their metal implants and red scales. The Democratic Federation representatives in their environmental suits. None of them paid attention to the humans anymore. The vote was over and they were already discussing other matters. Hana stood up quietly and walked toward the exit. The other human diplomats followed her. They had done this many times before. Arrive with hope, leave with nothing. But this time was different. This time, they would not be coming back. On Mars, Minho received the same message while standing in the orbital factory control room. He looked out through the transparent walls at the red planet below and the busy space traffic around it. Human. Ships moved cargo between the stations. Human workers maintained the massive manufacturing platforms. Human engineers kept everything running smoothly. "Begin shutdown procedures," Minho told his team. "Make it look like routine maintenance." His assistant Kyung-soo looked confused. "Sir, we have orders for the next 6 months. The Velthari need those quantum processors for their new colonies." "Not anymore," Minho said. He activated his personal communicator and sent a coded message to every human facility in the system. Within hours, the great factories that had built ships and technology for dozens of alien worlds would go dark. Yunji stood on the observation deck of the agricultural station orbiting Kepler 7. Below her, the planet's surface showed the green and gold patterns of human-designed farms. 3 billion aliens lived on that world and ate food grown using human methods. They never thanked the farmers who had turned a dead rock into a garden. Her teams were already loading the transport ships, seeds, equipment, genetic samples, and most importantly, the agricultural specialists who knew how to make plants grow. In alien soil, the planet's government thought the humans were just rotating personnel. They did not know that every human farmer was leaving forever. "The last transport departs in 6 hours, her deputy Wu Jin reported. "The local authorities approved our departure schedules without question." "Of course they did," Yunji said. "They think we are just workers. They never understood that we were the ones keeping their people fed." On the other side of the galaxy, Sora sat in the central communication hub for the galactic network. Hundreds of screens showed data flowing between thousands of worlds. Messages, trade information, news, and entertainment moved through the quantum channels that humans had built and maintained for over a century. Her fingers moved across the control interfaces as she began implementing the new protocols. Nothing dramatic. Just small changes that would cause tiny delays. A few milliseconds here, a minor routing adjustment there. The aliens would not notice anything wrong for months. "Are you sure about this?" asked Taehoon, her senior technician. "When they realize what we have done, they will be very angry." "Let them be angry," Sora replied. "They had their chance to treat us as equals. Now they can learn what life is like without us." The changes spread through the network like a slow virus. Communication speeds dropped by fractions of percentages. Nothing that would cause alarms, but enough to begin the gradual breakdown of efficiency that kept galactic civilization running. Nari packed her research notes in her laboratory on the science station orbiting Alpha Centauri. 40 years of work, studying how different species could live together, how to prevent diseases from jumping between alien populations, how to maintain ecological balance on mixed species worlds. The Council's Science Division had her reports, but they never read them carefully. They filed them away and forgot about them. Dr. Nari, her Zephyrian assistant said, where should I send your final research data? Delete it, she said simply. If they want to know how to keep their worlds healthy, they can figure it out themselves. Back on Earth, Jinsu stood in the Yar command center deep beneath Seoul. Massive displays showed the status of human operations across the galaxy. Green lights turned amber as facilities shut down according to schedule. Ships departed on their final journeys. Personnel transferred to new assignments far from Council space. Phase 1 completion is at 78%, reported Daeho from his station. All major operations will be concluded within 96 hours. Any problems? Jinsu asked. The Krathari are asking questions about the factory shutdowns on Rigel 4. Commander Hyunwoo told them it was scheduled maintenance. Good. Let them think that. How are the navigation databases? Changmin looked up from his console. Dongyun's teams have completed the deletions. Every Stargate we built, every trade route we mapped, every safe passage we discovered, all of it is gone from the public records. And our private records? Safely stored in the new archives beyond the void barrier. Jinsu nodded. Humanity had spent 2 centuries building the infrastructure that allowed galactic civilization to function. They had connected distant worlds, established safe travel routes, and created the communication networks that kept trillions of beings in contact. All of it had been given freely to species that saw humans as useful but unimportant. Now they would learn the difference between using something and understanding it. Young men entered the command center carrying a datapad. Sir, I have the final. Evacuation numbers. 847 worlds, 12 million human citizens and their families, 900,000 specialists and technicians. The fleet is ready to depart. Any volunteers to stay behind? None, sir. Even the humans married to aliens have chosen to leave. They say their spouses never really understood them anyway. Jinsu thought about his own wife, Mirai, who had died 3 years ago. She had spent her life studying alien cultures, hoping to build better relationships between species. She had believed that understanding would lead to respect, but the Council had never tried to understand humans. They had simply used them. Begin Phase 2, he ordered. Signal all ships to depart for the rendezvous points. Across human space, the Great Migration began. Ships that had been loading supplies for weeks suddenly left their ports. Families that had lived on alien worlds for generations gathered their possessions and disappeared into space. Research stations went dark. Communication relays switched to automated systems that would slowly degrade over time. In the council chambers, Hana sent her final message as Earth's ambassador. The human delegation hereby withdraws from all council proceedings indefinitely. We thank the council for their consideration of our proposals over the past 2 centuries. She did not mention that humans were withdrawing from everything else as well. The council would discover that soon enough. As her ship left the station, Hana looked back at the massive structure where she had spent 5 years trying to make alien species understand that humans deserved respect. She felt no sadness, only relief that she would never have to sit in those back rows again. The galaxy continued turning, unaware that its quiet caretakers had slipped away into the dark between the stars. Kyung-hee stood in her empty office on Proxima Station and looked at the resignation letter on her desk. 3 months had passed since the human evacuation began, and she was the last human administrator in the entire Proxima system. The Zephyrian authorities had barely acknowledged her departure request. We can manage without human oversight, Director Velkanen had told her during their final meeting. His large black eyes showed no concern. Your people were adequate workers, but hardly essential. Now Kyung-hee watched through her window as the atmospheric processors on the planet below began showing warning lights. Red indicators flashed across the control panels that the Zephyrians had taken over. They had operated the systems for exactly 2 weeks. Her communicator buzzed. Administrator Kyung-hee, we need your assistance, came the voice of Chief Engineer Zelthera. The atmospheric processors are showing error codes we do not understand. I am no longer the administrator, Kyung-hee replied calmly. I submitted my final reports yesterday. Everything you need should be in the system databases. We have checked the databases. The human modifications to the processors are not documented anywhere. Kyung-hee smiled. Of course they were not documented. Tae-hoon had designed those systems to work the way humans thought. The modifications seemed obvious to any human engineer but would make no sense to minds that worked differently. The Zephyrians could read the technical manuals, but they could not understand the logic behind human design choices. "I am sorry," she said. "My transport leaves in 2 hours. You will have to solve this yourselves." On Kepler Prime, Wu Jin locked the doors of the last human trading post in the system. The Xerillian Trade Federation had been celebrating for weeks. Now they could control the rare Earth markets without human competition. Federation Director Zektor had made speeches about how aliens could handle commerce better than humans ever. Could Wu Jin carried his final inventory reports to the Federation offices. The Xerillian clerk who accepted them had 4 arms and could process data much faster than humans. But he did not understand what the numbers meant. "These mineral shipments," the clerk said, looking at the reports. "Why do humans ship such small quantities? Our analysis shows we can increase profits by shipping 10 times as much." "You can try," Wu Jin said. "The shipping schedules and safety protocols are all in the files I gave you." What he did not mention was that humans had not been competing in the rare earth markets. They had been regulating them. The small shipments prevented market flooding that would crash prices and destroy mining communities. The careful scheduling ensured that all species got fair access to materials they needed. But the Xerillians would learn that the hard way. Nari sat in her laboratory on the research station and watched her replacement try to understand her work. Dr. Keth Moran was a brilliant Krathari scientist with cybernetic implants that enhanced his memory and processing speed. He could memorize her 40 years of research in a few days. But memorizing was not the same as understanding. "This data on ecosystem balance," Dr. Keth Moran said, his metal implants flashing as he accessed information. "It shows that removing certain bacteria from agricultural worlds causes crop failures within 18 months. But the bacteria serve no obvious purpose." "They serve many purposes," Nari explained patiently. "The soil chemistry, the plant root development, the seasonal growth cycles, everything is connected." "But where are the mathematical models? Where are the predictive algorithms? Human research methods are so primitive." Nari packed the last of her personal items. The Krathari thought that everything could be reduced to mathematics and algorithms. They did not understand that living systems were too complex for simple formulas. Human farmers succeeded because they watched and learned and adapted. They felt their way through problems that could not be calculated. "My final report covers everything you need to know," she said. "Good luck with your research." Dr. Keth Moran would spend months trying to create mathematical models of systems that required intuition and experience to manage. By then, 3 agricultural worlds would be facing ecological collapse. Yeji supervised the shutdown of the Galactic Communication Hub on Station Omega. Her replacement was a team of 12 Velthari technicians, led by engineer Polkatan. They had studied human-built communication systems for years and were confident they could maintain the network. "The quantum entanglement equations are straightforward," engineer Polkatan clicked to his team. "Human mathematics are basic, but functional." Yeji said nothing as she handed over the control codes. The equations were indeed straightforward if you understood the principles behind them. But humans had developed quantum communication through experimentation and intuition as much as mathematics. The formulas worked because humans had learned to feel the quantum fluctuations in ways that could not be easily explained. Within days of the human departure, message delays increased from seconds to minutes. The Velthari technicians adjusted settings and ran diagnostics, but the problems grew worse. They had the equations but not the understanding. "Why are the quantum channels destabilizing?" Engineer Polkatan asked during an emergency consultation call with Yeji. "Check the harmonic resonance buffers," she replied from her ship already light years away. The equations in the manual should explain everything, but they did not explain the subtle adjustments that human operators made by instinct, the tiny corrections that prevented cascade failures, the delicate balance that kept quantum channels stable across vast distances. Jiangsu stood on the bridge of the transport ship New Busan and watched the final evacuation convoys leave Council space. 600 human ships carrying 12 million people and everything they needed to build a new civilization. The largest migration in human history, and the galaxy barely noticed. Long-range sensors show no pursuit, reported Navigator Ji Wu. The Council authorities still think we are conducting routine personnel rotations. Excellent, Jiangsu said. How long before they realize what has happened? Intelligence estimates 6 months to 1 year. The system failures will be gradual, at first. Jiangsu looked at the star charts showing their destination. The void between, a region of space that other species considered empty and worthless. But human scientists had discovered something there that would change everything. Dark matter streams that could be harnessed for faster-than-light travel. Pocket dimensions where entire civilizations could hide. Energy sources that made fusion. Power look primitive! Signal the fleet, he ordered. Set course for the rendezvous point. Behind them, the galaxy continued its daily routines, unaware that its foundation was crumbling. Soyoung monitored the communication delays from her stealth ship hiding in the asteroid belt of the Rigel system. The network degradation was proceeding, exactly as planned. 5-minute delays had become 10-minute delays. Simple messages that once traveled instantly across the galaxy now took hours to reach their destinations. The Council is starting to notice, reported intelligence officer Sun Wu. They are asking for status reports from the communication hubs. And what are they hearing? Standard responses, technical difficulties, routine maintenance. The automated systems are working perfectly. The automated systems that Yeji's team had programmed to give reassuring responses while the network slowly collapsed. By the time the aliens realized what was happening, it would be too late to fix. Mirai studied the xenological reports from their observation posts throughout the galaxy. Even after 3 months, most species had not noticed the human departure. They assumed the system problems were temporary glitches. They believed their own people could handle anything humans had been doing. The Devourers are showing increased activity in the Outer Rim, she reported to the command staff. Without human containment protocols, they are testing the barrier systems. How long before they break through? Asked Admiral Kang Hoon. 6 months, maybe less. The automated defenses are sophisticated, but they require constant maintenance and adjustment. The Devourers were one of several ancient threats that the galaxy had forgotten about. Creatures from the space between galaxies that consumed energy and matter indiscriminately. Humans had built elaborate containment systems to keep them away from populated worlds. But those systems needed constant attention from people who understood how the Devourers thought and moved. Now the galaxy would have to learn about old threats the hard way. Hein reviewed the final evacuation reports in her command center. Every human facility had been abandoned on schedule. Every strategic position had been quietly surrendered. Every piece of critical infrastructure had been left in alien hands. Final count shows complete withdrawal from Council space, reported Coordinator Daiho. All personnel are en route to the new colonies. Any regrets about leaving? Hein asked. None reported, ma'am. Most evacuees say they should have left years ago. Hein understood that feeling. Humans had spent 2 centuries trying to earn respect from species that saw them as useful tools rather than equal partners. They had built the infrastructure of galactic civilization and received only condescension in return. Now they would build something better in the darkness between stars. Something that belonged only to humanity. Counselor Vexathara of the Velthari stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council and tried to keep his clicking voice calm. 3 years had passed since the human evacuation, and the galaxy was falling apart. The great chamber that had once buzzed with confident voices now felt hollow and desperate. "We have a crisis," he announced to the assembled delegates. "The rimward trade route has completely collapsed. 17 systems are reporting critical supply shortages. The Kepler agricultural zone is facing systematic crop failures. Communication delays between sectors now exceed 6 hours." Gyeongsu watched the emergency session from a hidden observation post beyond the galactic rim. His stealth ships had been monitoring Council communications for months, watching the slow realization spread through their leadership. The irony was perfect. The same Velthari who had blocked human trade proposals now begged for solutions to problems that only humans had prevented. "Where are the humans?" asked Xerillian Trade Director Zektor, his 4 arms gesturing frantically. "We have sent messages to all human colonies, but received no responses." "The human colonies appear to be abandoned," reported Council Intelligence Chief Rathmore. "Our survey teams found empty cities and deactivated facilities. No signs of conflict or disaster. They simply left." The Krathari delegate's cybernetic implants flashed as he accessed data. "Analysis shows that human departure correlates directly with system failures across 17 sectors. This cannot be coincidence." Gyeongsu smiled as he listened to their desperate discussions. They were finally beginning to understand, but it was far too late. Humanity had moved beyond their reach, establishing new colonies in the void between where alien sensors could not follow. On the former human agricultural world of New Eden, Administrator Kelthon of the Zephyrian Colonial Authority stood in the empty control center and stared at displays showing crop failure across 60% of the planet. The automated systems that humans had left behind were shutting down one by one, displaying error messages in languages that no alien could read. "The soil bacteria levels are dropping rapidly," reported Chief Agricultural Officer Zenmira. "We have followed all the procedures in the human manuals, but nothing works." "Contact the human research stations," Kelthon ordered. "Someone must have more detailed information." "Sir, the human research stations were abandoned 18 months ago. We tried to maintain them ourselves, but the biological systems are too complex. We lost the bacterial cultures within weeks." Kelthon looked out the window at the brown fields that had once fed millions. The humans had turned this dead world into a garden, using methods that seemed simple but required knowledge that took decades to develop. The Zephyrians had the equipment and the basic procedures, but they did not understand the living systems that made everything work. Without the carefully maintained soil bacteria, the crops were dying. Without the humans who understood how to maintain bacterial balance, there was no way to save them. Jiwon sat in the command center of the stealth vessel Silent Thunder and reviewed intelligence reports from across the galaxy. Her logistics algorithms had been the foundation of galactic trade for over a century. Now that she had removed them, shipping costs had increased by 300% and delivery times had become completely unpredictable. The Xerillian Trade Federation is requesting emergency assistance, reported Intelligence Officer Minsok. Their cargo ships are lost in hyperspace. They cannot calculate safe jump routes without the human navigation matrices. And the response from other species? The Velthari are hoarding resources. The Krathari are militarizing their borders. The Democratic Federation is fragmenting as member worlds blame each other for the supply failures. Jiwon had designed those navigation matrices over 40 years of careful work. They took into account gravitational fluctuations, solar wind patterns, and quantum field variations that changed constantly throughout the galaxy. The calculations required both advanced mathematics and intuitive understanding of how space itself behaved. The aliens had the raw data, but they could not create the predictive models that made safe hyperspace travel possible. They were reduced to following old routes that became less reliable every day. Hyunwoo commanded the human fleet from his flagship New Seoul, hidden in a dark matter stream near the galactic core. His scouts reported increasing chaos as alien civilizations struggled with problems they had never had to face before. The Devourer containment systems are failing, reported Captain Mireille from the forward observation post. Barrier strength has dropped by 40% in the last 6 months. How long before they break through? Intelligence estimates 3 months, maybe less if the power grid failures continue. The Devourers were ancient horrors from the space between galaxies, creatures of pure hunger that consumed energy and matter without distinction. Humanity had spent centuries building elaborate containment fields to keep them away from populated worlds. But those fields required constant maintenance and adjustment by people who understood how the Devourers moved and thought. The aliens had assumed the containment was automatic. They never realized that human teams had been making thousands of tiny adjustments every day to keep the barrier stable. Now the oldest and most dangerous threats in the galaxy were stirring again. Council historian Veltana made the discovery. That changed everything while researching the crisis for her emergency report. Hidden in archived databases that no one had accessed for decades, she found records that revealed humanity's true role in galactic civilization. Every major trade route established in the last 2 centuries had been surveyed by human exploration teams. Every peaceful resolution of interspecies conflict had involved human mediators. Every technological breakthrough that improved life for billions had human fingerprints on it. They were not junior partners, she reported to the emergency council session. They were the foundation. Everything that worked in our civilization was built on human knowledge and maintained by human specialists. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. 200 years of galactic prosperity had been made possible by a species that they had dismissed as useful but unimportant. Why did we not see this before? Asked the Democratic Federation representative. Because they were quiet about it, Veltana replied. Humans shared their knowledge freely and took credit for nothing. They let us believe we were managing our own affairs while they quietly solved every problem that arose. Daeho monitored the Council's desperate communications from his intelligence station in the void. The aliens were finally understanding their dependency, but they still had no idea where humanity had gone or how to contact them. They are offering tribute, he reported to the command staff. Territory, resources, technology, anything to bring the humans back. Too little, too late, replied Admiral Kang-hoon. They had 2 centuries to treat us as equals. Now they can learn to live without us. The automated systems that humans had left behind were entering their final shutdown phases. Navigation beacons went dark across major trade routes. Communication, relays fell silent one by one. Life support systems on space stations began displaying critical errors that no alien technician could solve. Minji watched the cascade failures from her monitoring station and felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She had spent 30 years designing backup systems and redundancies to keep alien civilizations running smoothly. Those systems were now shutting down according to their programmed schedules. Atmospheric processing on 17 worlds has reached critical status, she reported. The Zephyrian colonies will be uninhabitable within 12 months if they cannot restore the bacterial balance. Any sign that they understand the solution? None. They keep trying to solve biological problems. With technology, they cannot accept that some things require intuition and experience rather than calculations. The galaxy that had once run smoothly under human guidance was learning what chaos looked like. Supply lines collapsed. Communication networks failed. Ancient threats stirred in the darkness. And still the Council sent messages to empty space, begging for help that would never come. Young-ho served as speaker for the new Human Void Council and reviewed the latest plea from the Galactic Council. They offered humanity equal representation, expanded territory, and control over trade routes, everything they had requested and been denied for 2 centuries. Delete it, he told his communications staff. We are beyond the need for their recognition now. Humanity had found something better in the dark between the stars. Technologies that made their former contributions seem primitive. ships that could travel through dimensions the aliens did not know existed, energy sources that dwarfed anything the Council had ever imagined. They had evolved beyond the species that had dismissed them as servants. Seo-hyun stood on the observation deck of the exploration vessel Pioneer and watched the construction of humanity's first void cities. Massive structures built in folded space that could house millions of people while remaining completely invisible to alien sensors. The new colonies are exceeding all expectations, reported Chief Engineer Woo Jin. We have resources and technologies here that will let us build a civilization far greater than anything in Council space. And the old galaxy? Admiral Kang Hoon received the urgent transmission in his command center deep within the void between galaxies. 5 years had passed since humanity's exodus, and his deep space monitoring stations had detected something that made his blood run cold. The collective was moving again, no longer contained by the barriers that humans had maintained for over 2 centuries. Confirmed contact with collective scout ships in the Outer Rim, reported Captain Suman from the monitoring station. They have breached the primary containment grid in 3 locations. Kang Hoon studied the tactical displays showing the ancient enemy's movement patterns. The collective was a hive mind of insect-like creatures that had once consumed entire sectors before humans developed the containment technology that held them back. Now, with human maintenance teams gone, the barriers were failing one by one. Estimated time before they reach populated systems? 18 months for the first wave. They are moving slowly, testing the defenses. When they realize how weak the barriers have become, they will accelerate. The galaxy that had dismissed humanity was about to face its oldest nightmare without the guardians who had protected them for generations. On the former Council capital world, economic analyst Zelkara presented her findings to the Emergency Leadership Council. The data was devastating. Without human stability and innovation, the galactic economy had collapsed beyond any hope of recovery. Trade volume has decreased by 87%, she reported to the desperate alien leaders. 17 major shipping companies have declared bankruptcy. The Zerillion Trade Federation has lost 90% of its assets trying to maintain routes they cannot navigate safely. Council Speaker Morhana, who had once presided over sessions that dismissed human proposals, now faced the complete breakdown of everything she had taken for granted. What about food production? Can we, at least, feed our populations? Agricultural output has fallen by 63% across all sectors. The Kepler Zone, which once fed 40 billion beings, is now importing basic grains from primitive worlds that still use traditional farming methods. The irony was bitter. Planets that had never received human agricultural assistance were now the only ones capable of growing food reliably. The advanced worlds that had relied on human-designed farming systems were slowly starving. Suman watched the economic collapse from her analysis station in the human fleet. Her projections had predicted this exact scenario 5 years ago, but no alien government had bothered to read her reports. They had assumed that economics was just numbers and mathematics, not understanding that stable markets required intuition, trust, and careful management of countless variables. The Krathari Imperium is requesting emergency food shipments, reported Trade Monitor Deho. They are offering advanced military technology in exchange for basic agricultural products. And our response? Standard protocol. No acknowledgement of communication. As far as the galaxy knows, humanity never existed. The mighty Krathari, who had once boasted that their cybernetic enhancements made them superior to biological intelligence, were now begging for food from species they had previously considered primitive. Their mathematical models could not solve problems that required understanding living systems. Council historian Veltana made another discovery that shattered what remained of alien confidence. While researching the history of galactic conflicts, she found evidence that humans had secretly prevented 17 major wars in the past century alone. Every crisis that could have led to interstellar war was resolved by human diplomats working behind the scenes, she reported to the Council's emergency session. The border dispute between the Velthari and the Xerillians, the resource conflicts in the Outer Rim, the religious war that nearly destroyed the Democratic Federation, all of them were ended by human mediation. But there are no records of human involvement, protested the Velthari representative, because they deliberately stayed in the background. They let other species take credit for the peace agreements while they did the actual work of building trust and finding compromises. The chamber erupted in shocked voices as delegates realized that their entire peaceful civilization had been built on human foundation that they had never acknowledged. Without human peacemakers, the galaxy was already fragmenting into the tribal, conflicts that had dominated the pre-human era. Minji commanded the automated systems network from her station aboard the research vessel New Horizon. The shutdown sequences she had programmed years ago were entering their final phases, and the results were exactly as devastating as she had intended. Life support failures reported on 47 space stations, her assistant Changmin reported. The backup systems are displaying error codes that no alien technician can interpret. Because the error codes are in ancient Korean, Minji replied with satisfaction. Even if they translate them, the repair procedures require understanding of human intuitive engineering methods. The aliens had assumed that technology was universal, that any intelligent species could maintain systems built by another. They never understood that human engineering incorporated psychological and cultural elements that made perfect sense to humans, but were incomprehensible to alien minds. Navigation beacons throughout the galaxy went dark as they're human-designed. Power systems reached the end of their programmed operational periods. Trade ships that had relied on those beacons for safe hyperspace travel found themselves lost in the void between stars. 83 ships reported missing in the last month, reported the Emergency Council. The hyperspace routes are becoming too dangerous to use. Captain Jaewon monitored the navigation failures from his stealth reconnaissance vessel. The mathematical models that aliens used for hyperspace travel were based on human discoveries, but they lacked the intuitive understanding that made those calculations work in practice. The Xerillian merchant fleet is down to 12% operational capacity, he reported to the fleet command. They are trying to use pre-human navigation methods, but their ships are not designed for such primitive techniques. Any attempts to reverse engineer our navigation systems? Constant attempts, but they are focusing on the wrong elements. They think it is all mathematics when the real key is understanding how space itself behaves. They cannot feel the quantum fluctuations the way humans do. Humanity had developed hyperspace navigation through centuries of careful experimentation and intuitive leaps that could not be easily replicated. The aliens had the formulas, but not the understanding that made those formulas work. Hein reviewed the final intelligence reports from their observation posts throughout the galaxy. The situation was deteriorating even faster than their most pessimistic projections had predicted. The Devourer breakthrough is now estimated at 6 months ahead of schedule, she reported to the Void Council. The containment grid has suffered complete failure in the Outer Rim sectors. What about the collective? Asked Admiral Kang-hoon. They have overrun 4 systems and show no signs of slowing down. The automated defense platforms are falling back to secondary positions. The ancient threats that humanity had contained for centuries were breaking free all at once. The galaxy faced its greatest crisis in recorded history, and the species that could have saved them had vanished into the darkness between stars. Young-hee monitored the desperate communications from the dying galaxy. The Council had gone beyond, offering tribute or territory. They were now promising to name humans as the dominant species, to give them control over all galactic institutions, to serve them in whatever capacity they demanded. They still do not understand, she reported, to the command staff. They think this is about power and control. They cannot comprehend that we have moved beyond the need for their recognition. The Council's pleas became increasingly desperate as their civilization crumbled. They offered to disband the Council itself and replace it with human leadership. They promised to study human culture and adopt human values. They begged for just one representative to come back and help them understand what they had lost. But humanity had found something infinitely better in the void, technologies that used dark matter and quantum foam to reshape reality itself. Ships that could travel through dimensions that existed outside normal space-time. Energy sources that drew power from the fundamental forces that held the universe together. The new cities are ahead of construction schedule, reported Chief Engineer Sun Wu. We now have the capacity to house 50 million humans in complete security. The dimensional barriers make us invisible to any scanning technology the aliens possess. Seo Hyun walked through the gardens of New Seoul, a city that existed in folded space, where plants grew in impossible colors, and gravity flowed in patterns that created floating waterfalls. Around her, human children played games that used the fundamental forces of reality as toys. The first generation of void-born humans is showing capabilities we never expected, reported Education Coordinator Yoonbi. They can perceive dimensions that were invisible to us. They think in patterns that incorporate quantum mechanics as naturally as we use basic mathematics. Humanity was evolving beyond what they had been when they lived among the aliens. The species that had dismissed them as useful servants could never have imagined what their former workers were becoming. Seo Hyun stood on the bridge of the New Seoul and watched the final death throes of galactic civilization through sensors that could perceive reality across 17 dimensions. 7 years had passed since humanity's quiet exodus and the galaxy, burned with conflicts that would have been impossible during the human era. Devourer fleets have consumed the Velthari homeworld, reported Tactical Officer Ji Woo. Estimated population loss is 47 billion. The Krathari Imperium has activated their doomsday weapons, but the energy discharges are only feeding the Devourers. And the Collective? They have overrun 73 systems and show no signs of slowing down. The Democratic Federation attempted to negotiate, but the Collective consumed their diplomatic envoys. Seo Hyun felt no satisfaction in watching the galaxy's destruction. Only a deep sadness for species that could have been saved if they had learned to value their guardians before. Driving them away, the irony was complete. The Council had dismissed humanity as insignificant workers, never realizing that humans had been the galaxy's immune system against threats that predated civilization itself. Jae-won supervised the strategic defense networks from the command center of the stealth vessel Silent Guardian. For decades, his early warning systems had prevented extinction events that the galaxy never knew were coming. His peacekeeping protocols had stopped interstellar wars before they began. His containment fields had held back horrors from the dark spaces between stars. The ancient hunger has awakened in the galactic core, he reported to the fleet commanders. Without the resonance dampeners we maintained, the quantum fluctuations have reached critical amplitude. Estimated time before core collapse? 18 months. The gravitational waves will destroy every star system within 20,000 light-years of the center. The hunger was the oldest threat humanity had ever encountered, a quantum phenomenon that fed on stellar energy and grew stronger with each star it consumed. Human scientists had developed resonance dampeners that kept it dormant for over 3 centuries. But those dampeners required constant fine-tuning by operators who could sense quantum variations that no instrument could measure. Now the galaxy would learn what happened when ancient evils were left unguarded. Hein reviewed the final intelligence. Reports in the Void Council chambers, a structure that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously and could house 1 billion beings in perfect comfort. The reports painted a picture of complete civilizational collapse across all sectors of known space. The Galactic Council has dissolved, reported Intelligence Coordinator Chang Min. The surviving members are fighting each other for resources. The Zerillian Trade Federation declared war on the Zephyrian Colonial Authority yesterday. The Krathari launched a preemptive strike against the Democratic Federation this morning. Casualties? Impossible to calculate. Communication networks are down across 60% of the galaxy. We estimate that total population loss exceeds 2 trillion beings in the last year alone. Hyen thought about the children playing in the gardens of New Soul, learning to shape reality with their thoughts, while the species that had dismissed their ancestors tore each other apart in desperate struggles for survival. The surviving. Council members continued sending increasingly frantic messages to empty space. Some offered complete surrender and slavery to any humans who would return. Others threatened to develop weapons that could find humanity in their hidden dimensions. All begged for mercy from guardians they had never appreciated. Young He deleted each message without reading it, just as she had done for 7 years. The time for pleading had passed. Humanity had moved beyond the need for alien recognition or gratitude. Sun Wu led the archaeological expeditions that studied the ruins of human civilization throughout the galaxy. The irony was bitter and perfect. Alien scientists now treated abandoned human facilities like lost wonders from a golden age, desperately trying to reverse engineer technologies that had been freely shared for centuries. The Krathari research teams have been working on the quantum resonance chambers for 3 years, he reported from his survey ship. They have dismantled 17 facilities trying to understand how human operators could sense quantum fluctuations. Any progress? None. They keep looking for technological solutions when the answer was always biological. Human neural patterns evolved to process quantum information in ways that cannot be replicated artificially. The aliens had assumed that any technology could be understood and duplicated by sufficiently advanced minds. They never comprehended that human achievements were based on intuitive abilities that developed over millennia of evolution in ways that alien brains could not match. Sora monitored the communication networks from her position aboard the research vessel Quantum Dawn. The galactic network that had once carried messages across millions of worlds in seconds now took days to transmit simple signals between neighboring systems. Network efficiency is down to 0.3% of original capacity, she reported. Most sectors have reverted to light-speed communication or courier ships. How long before complete collapse? The cascade failures are accelerating. Complete network shutdown is estimated within 6 months. The quantum entanglement principles that made instant galactic communication possible were not difficult to understand mathematically. But implementing them required operators who could feel the subtle harmonics of quantum fields in ways that took humans decades to develop. The aliens had the equations, but not the intuitive understanding that made those equations work in practice. Yunbi supervised the education centers in the Void Cities, where human children learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality as easily as their ancestors had learned to read and write. The first generation born in folded space showed abilities that would have seemed impossible to the humans who had lived among aliens. The children are developing new sensory organs, she reported to the Science Council. They can perceive dimensional boundaries, quantum fluctuations, and temporal variations that we cannot detect even with instruments. Are they still recognizably human? Completely human, but human as we were meant to be. Without the limitations imposed by living in normal space-time, our evolution has accelerated beyond anything we imagined possible. The young humans playing in the impossible gardens of New Soul were becoming something that transcended the species that had dismissed their ancestors. They thought in patterns that incorporated higher mathematics as naturally as breathing. They could sense the connections between all things across space and time. Mirai studied the xenological data from their observation posts and watched the final transformation of galactic civilization into something unrecognizable. The peaceful federation of worlds that had lasted for millennia was fragmenting into tribal warfare that consumed entire star systems. The species that wanted to manage everything themselves are discovering what that actually means, she reported to the command staff. Without human mediation, They have reverted to the conflicts that dominated the pre-human era. Any attempts at cooperation? None successful. The Velthari and Xerillians destroyed each other's fleets last week. The Krathari are using biological weapons against the Zephyrians. The Democratic Federation split into 47 warring factions. The galaxy that had once been united by human diplomacy and shared prosperity was dying in conflicts that human peacemakers would have prevented, with a few carefully chosen words. Seo Hyun made the final entry in humanity's record of their former home. Standing in her command center that existed outside normal space and time, she looked back at the burning galaxy through sensors that could perceive the past, present, and future simultaneously. They wanted servants and dismissed their guardians. She wrote, "They received exactly what they deserved. Let this be the last record of our time among the ungrateful stars." The new soul turned away from the dying galaxy toward the infinite possibilities that awaited humanity in the spaces between reality. Behind them, the Devourers consumed the last of the core worlds. The collective spread like a plague through the outer rim. The hunger awakened in the galactic center and began devouring stars by the thousands. Ancient horrors that humanity had contained for centuries were breaking free all at once. And there were no guardians left to stop them. Minho supervised the construction of the first human ships capable of traveling between galaxies. Using dark matter streams and quantum foam manipulation, they could cross the vast emptiness between star clusters in a matter of months rather than millions of years. "The Andromeda expedition is ready for departure," he reported to the Exploration Council. 30 ships, 2 million volunteers, everything needed to establish humanity's first extragalactic colonies. Any interest in returning to our former galaxy? None. The survey teams have confirmed that the core collapse will make the entire region uninhabitable within 50 years. Better to build something new than try to save something that chose to destroy itself. Humanity spread across the universe like seeds carried on cosmic winds, establishing civilizations in distant galaxies where no other intelligent life had ever existed. They built wonders that made their former achievements seem primitive, created technologies that used the fundamental forces of reality as raw materials.